Resident Evil 4 is my favorite Resident Evil game, and after playing the demo I can just tell you the hype is real. And before we now talking about HDR, please do me a big favor. I put a lot of effort and hard work in this video, so please like, share and subscribe. Thank you. But now let's talk about HDR. I tested the PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X and the PC version, and all what I found is slightly different settings between the platforms. So Xbox and PlayStation 5 are sharing the exact same settings. On the PC, on the other hand, you have different settings. But that's not a big deal because I'm going to share my settings in a second with you. Now let's talk about the most important, or one of the most important questions, what we have when we're talking about HDR gaming. Black level rays. Do we have any sort of black level rays in Resident Evil 4? And the answer is quite simple. I couldn't find any trace of black level rays when you activate HDR in Resident Evil 4. Not on the PlayStation 5, not on the Xbox Series X and not on the PC, which is a big surprise because I was thinking that at least the PC version will suffering from black level rays, but thanks God, nothing at all. You can enjoy the game on all three platforms in perfect HDR. And there's also no surprise that the HDR system level calibration is not supported. Not on the PlayStation 5, not on the PC and not on the Xbox Series X, because all Resident Evil games so far did not support the HDR system level calibration because we have more or less good working sliders in the game. And what I mean with more or less good working sliders, let me explain this to you. I told you already in the beginning that there are slightly different settings when we're talking about the console version and the PC version. So on here we have the problem. If you play the game on a PlayStation 5 or Xbox or any console and you would follow the instruction on the screen in terms of your maximum peak brightness, you would do it actually wrong. So let's take my LG G2 for an example, which has a maximum peak brightness of around 1000 nits, and if I would follow the instruction on the screen, I would actually set up the maximum peak brightness to around 1300 nits in the game, even I'm following the instructions. So this is a known issue in many other Resident Evil games, but now let's talk about the PC version. And this is actually very interesting. As soon you play the game on the PC and you, let's say, calibrate the game for an LG G2, again 1000 nits maximum peak brightness, then you would have the perfect setting because the output now is around 1000 nits. So you can see between PlayStation 5, Xbox Series, or between the console version and the PC version, there is a difference in terms of settings. And this is actually the only difference what I found between the PC and the console version. HDR looks superb everywhere. Regardless where you play the game, it is just a great experience. But now let's talk about my recommended settings for a couple of TVs. But before we do this, we need to talk about the settings what we have in the game. And we have, of course, the maximum brightness setting, which is the maximum peak brightness for specular highlights. And then on the next page, we have the brightness setting, which is just decreasing or increasing the overall brightness from the game. And I would say let's start talking about the brightness setting in the game, because what I found is that the standard factory setting is actually quite good in combination with my LG CX or the G2 and HDR enabled. If you like to increase or decrease this setting, you can do this, because what I found is that between +5 and -5, and yes, 0 is for me always the standard factory setting, but between minus and +5 there is 0 difference in terms of the maximum peak brightness in specular highlights. And this is exactly what I like to see, because I don't like to change the maximum peak brightness in specular highlights at all when I'm just changing the overall brightness in the game. So that means really you can set this up as you like it, but my recommendation is actually try the standard factory setting 0 with HDR enabled on a capable TV, of course, and do me the favor, play this game in a very dark room, because that is how it is supposed to be. And now let's talk about my recommended settings for the maximum peak brightness in the game for a couple of TVs. And I prepared this Excel sheet and I hope it's actually good enough that you understand what I'm talking about here. But please keep in mind again that we have different settings for the console and the PC version, as you can see in the table here. So this is very important, because if you would set up, let's say, a console according to the settings for the PC, then you would end up with a lot of clipping and specular highlights. And of course, we like to avoid that. Also, please keep in mind that I can't do the settings for all the TVs. So I did my very best to cover actually a wide variety in terms of the maximum peak brightness and the readings. And the reason why I stopped at 2000 candela, because there is no TV right now out there which can actually display more than 2000 nits in HDR, so that's why I stopped here. And I also included the new S95C and the LG G3, but this is just assumption or assuming right now what I'm doing here, so it's not confirmed that the TV really will have this maximum peak brightness in HDR. So if you own this TV already, then maybe you can give us a hint in the comment section. So just put in what settings are you using and how it looks like. I would much appreciate this. And now it's time to talk about what HDR tone mapping mode, like HDRG, dynamic tone mapping off, dynamic tone mapping on, you should actually use on supported TVs like the LG CX or the G2. So just keep in mind, if you own a S95B, then there is no proper HDRG support on this TV as far as I know, but I still would recommend that you actually enable the option on your TV to have a more accurate HDR picture. And my recommendation is, if you can, play this game with HDRG enabled to have the most accurate HDR picture. And again, if you find the picture a little bit too dark, you can easily increase the brightness setting, because it will not affect the maximum peak brightness in specular highlights. But of course, that's just my recommendation. You can also play the game with dynamic tone mapping turned on or dynamic tone mapping turned off, which I would not recommend at all in this game. And on the Xbox Series, of course, we have the option Dolby Vision. But let's make one thing very clear, there is no native Dolby Vision support in this game. That means you should not expect a very big difference between HDR10 and Dolby Vision. But of course, there will be a difference as always, but this is not because of Dolby Vision versus HDR10. This is because of your picture settings on your TV. After I recalibrated my CX with the latest Kalman software, I couldn't find that much of a difference between Dolby Vision and HDR10 on the Xbox Series X. Before the recalibration, there was actually a big difference, because in Dolby Vision, the CX and also the G2 are not following the EOTF curve as it should be. So that's most likely the difference what you see when you switch between HDR10 and Dolby Vision on the Xbox Series. So let's talk quickly about SDR, because sometimes I'm getting comments like SDR is so much better than HDR, HDR is washing out my picture, HDR just looks bad in terms of colors. And believe me, this is not the case with this game. And if you're still experiencing this after you switch to HDR, then maybe it's time for a new screen. Okay, so what is my conclusion now in terms of Resident Evil 4 and HDR? And we need to keep in mind that's a demo version, but I'm very sure this is also the final product, what we are going to see on the 24th. I do like the HDR implementation in this game. Like, I really do like it. It's just really, really good. On the same level or even better than Dead Space on the console or the PC, because also in Dead Space we haven't had any issue with elevated black levels at all, and this was just superb in terms of contrast, and the same counts here. Contrast wise, this is a game to show off on a really good HDR screen. And at the moment, I really can't wait anymore to play the final game or the full product on the 24th. The only question what I have left is, where should I get the game? On which platform? Should I get it on the PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X or the PC? That's really the only question what I have left, because in terms of HDR, you can't do anything wrong regardless what platform you choose. In terms of resolution, performance, that's of course a different topic, and maybe for a different video. Thank you very much for watching me. I see you guys next time. Bye.